Hello, I'm Jack Sparham and I want to talk a little bit about Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V is the fifth main installment in the Street Fighter series. I mean, there was, Street Fighter Alpha and, the many editions of both Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 4. But this is the fifth, game in the main series, essentially. And it's the first one I've really been able to pick up and enjoy. But I didn't choose to pick it up, and I didn't choose to enjoy it. All I really did was play, a couple of hours of multiplayer with my friend. And it did something different which other fighter games haven't done for me in the past, of being able to bring me in to the core gameplay and really feel like I'm making meaningful decisions in the gameplay. Because usually what kind of happens with fighting games, especially with me, I'm historically a Super Smash Bros. Player. I first got exposed to that series on the GameCube. It must have been early 2000s, maybe 2003, 2004. I had it when I got my GameCube along with Super Mario Sunshine and The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. And it did become one of those games which I spent a lot of hours with. Mostly the single player modes, Classic Avenger All-Star and the event missions. And I hadn't really had much exposure to fighting games at all, really. I never owned a traditional fighting game on any of the platforms that I owned. I think the first fighting game that I actually owned was the Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD remix on the PlayStation 3 after it was either given out on PlayStation Plus or to do with that leak back in 2008 or something. I'm not 100% sure when that happened. But as a Super Smash Bros. Player, I always thought that fighting games came down to which person really knew what buttons to hit and what order to do the moves to, get a combo, and then that's it. It felt like fighting games were very static and stale and didn't really have much interaction. It felt more like it was who was the best at pressing the buttons rather than who was the best at the game. I mean, that might be a little convoluted, but I hope that it's clear what I mean. I think the best example with what I used to think was that super moves in some of the older Street Fighter games, what essentially it came down to was that doing a quarter circle, 3 punches and something or whatever, right? And in Super Smash Bros., it never really came down to who was best at controlling the game, who knew what button did what, because in Smash Bros. The control scheme essentially came down to a couple of really easy, what I feel would be a natural control scheme by having the A and B be the only 2 attack buttons, and then each attack being a combination of the control stick and one of those buttons, whether that control stick being in a neutral position or left, right, up, down, and A and B, and then there's grabs and shields and all that, but everything was very distinct. And one of the troubles that I've always faced in traditional fighting games is, especially in Street Fighter, I'm pretty sure it's different in Mortal Kombat, but I really have no experience with that series at all. But this is mainly about me and traditional ones like Street Fighter. I know Mortal Kombat's traditional, but it's different. Blocking in Street Fighter has always been about holding back, and to me this always felt like a very weird choice, and some could argue that it's not very intuitive either. But this is not the point of this video, really. There's two modes to this blocking that you can do in Street Fighter by holding back. Is regular blocking by just holding back, or crouching and holding back. So you're like in a down left or down right position on the analog stick, and that allowed you to block low attacks. And what this means is essentially these two states of blocking block inherently different attacks, with the standard blocking being high and medium attacks, and the low blocking being medium and low attacks, where regular blockings will block attacks from the air, and bottom blocks being blocking like feet swiping attacks and all that. And coming from Smash Brothers especially, is Smash Brothers, there was only one type of blocking, and that was holding shield. I know Melee was slightly different as it had different varyings of shield, but it all kind of came down to you hold the block button and you're blocking. In that state, you could then only be grabbed instead of attacked. Well, I mean, your shield could be broken, but that's a different mechanic altogether. It's like, as soon as you press a block button, for any attack you're trying to block, obviously, it will be blocked. While in Street Fighter, if you're not blocking correctly, then you're not going to be blocking at all. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. Blocking is a key portion of Street Fighter 5, and any Street Fighter, when it comes down to it, is if you can't block, then your opponent will just, they will block your attack and then counter in an appropriate way, depending on their character choice. So the importance of blocking in Street Fighter is almost higher than the importance of blocking in Smash Brothers. I know that's different per game, but give me some room here. And the way you block, because of the two blocking states, it means that you also have to kind of predict which attack the opponent is making, meaning that any player in Street Fighter has to know what moves your opponent can make to be able to then successfully block those attacks. While in Smash Brothers, that is pretty much removed from the equation. Now, I'm not an expert on Street Fighter, but what I can tell you is that Street Fighter 5 is the most accessible Street Fighter game to date. And I believe this game, from my experience, I believe this game achieves this through the inherent changing of combination attacks. Now, this might be the biggest change in the roster, but I would like to compare Vega from Street Fighter 2 and Vega from Street Fighter 5. I think it's very clear to see when you compare the two movesets of Vega that the one in Street Fighter 5 has disambiguated a lot of the more strange commands to simple either rolling inputs, for example, the quarter circle Hadouken, half circle red Hadouken, and Z input Shuriken inputs. Sorry if I pronounce any of those wrong. And I think having the characters perform their different moves using similar methods of input for example the half circles, quarter circles and Z inputs, means that it is less taxing on a new player to be able to then first pick up someone that isn't, Ryu or Ken, for example, and then still be able to perform, their moves correctly. I think some of the biggest examples of hard to input moves on older Street Fighters would be Zangief, where he has many full circle or even double full circle inputs, which, while they aren't removed fully, they are simplified to an extent. I don't believe by simplifying the inputs for these attacks to lower the skill ceiling of the game, but I am of the belief that by changing inputs to be similar, it does dramatically reduce the skill floor of fighting games such as Street Fighter V. And that's extremely important for new players, or players that have played fighting games before but never really enjoyed them. However, after playing Street Fighter V for, 2 to 3 hours, I had to go back and look at the old Street Fighters to see what stopped me from liking the combat in those games. So I went back to open the only Street Fighter game that I actually own, which was Street Fighter 2 HD Remix, and I found that compared to Street Fighter V, the combat lacked some of the mechanics which I really liked in Street Fighter V. In Street Fighter 2 there is 3 types of attacks: regular attacks, special attacks, and super attacks, and that's it. Which isn't really a bad thing, but when you compare to Street Fighter V, in Street Fighter V there is 2 bars you can fill up: a V meter and a EX meter, which becomes a CA attack when fully charged up. This allows you to perform a variety of different moves based on how filled these meters are. The V meter can be filled up completely to activate a V trigger, or can be filled up partially to do a V reversal. Everyone's V meter in Street Fighter V is a different size depending on how powerful their V trigger move is in comparison to other characters. Each character also has an EX meter which fills up in 3 bars. This allows you to enhance any of your special attacks. And a CA move, which I believe stands for Critical Art, which allows you to perform another move which you can only perform when your EX bar is maxed. However, in Street Fighter 2, you have your super bar, and when it's full, you can perform your super attack. And that's the only extra mechanic added to Street Fighter 2's classic combat system. Now, one of these isn't necessarily better than the other. Some people might like the Street Fighter 2 system better than the Street Fighter V system, but I believe for a casual player, the Street Fighter V system is better purely because of the additional V bar. Street Fighter 4 had another mechanic which was similar but extremely broken, called a ultra attack. Now, I never really have experienced this, first-hand directly online or anything. I've only just been able to have a little bit of a go on the 3DS version of the game, and an ultra combo in Street Fighter 4 allowed a character to do a very significant amount of damage after taking a very significant amount of damage, usually about half your health. Now, on paper, this may not seem like a terrible idea, especially to, the development team at Capcom, but what it ended up doing was trivializing the super mechanic which you earned by attacking the player. So you had these 2 types of moves, the super combo and the ultra combo in Street Fighter 4, where the super combo was the one you earned and wasn't as good as the ultra combo which you got for losing. And Street Fighter V reverses the power in this situation by having your EX and CA attacks being the ones you earn by attacking the other player, and your V skill and your V reversals being stuff you are given to help you earn the EX and CA attacks. Each character in Street Fighter V have a V skill. Ryu's is parrying, Ken's is running. I believe Zangief's is being able to pose manly and then being able to take attacks almost like the charge attacks in Street Fighter 4. However, unlike the ultra combos in Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter V's V skills are nowhere near as powerful. They usually enhance some of the inherent good properties of a character instead of being essentially another super. Some people's V-triggers actually are moves, but these moves are usually nowhere near as powerful as the moves of both the EX and CA varieties. I believe Rashid of the Turbulent Winds V skill allows him to summon a storm, but this attack in its own only does moderately good amount of damage, and is better used to help Rashid with more mobility and essentially a wall which the opponent can't cross until it disappears, forcing them to either block in a corner or do something else which would require the other player reacting to the storm that is summoned. All of the V-trigger abilities are designed to both help the player using them and also give the opponent an interesting challenge to try and overcome to still win the match. Unlike ultra attacks in Street Fighter 4, where all they did was give the losing player an option to do a significant amount of damage. Now, I would argue that some V-trigger skills are inherently better than other V-trigger skills, but that's really a different matter to be talking about. I believe for this video, it is better to discuss how they assist a new player in being able to get into the game. V-trigger skills are all performed with the same button input, both heavy punch and heavy kick together. Because they are uniform across all characters, this means that a casual player that has just got into the game can easily perform this skill as any character, being able to then experiment to what this ability does for their character and how to play using that V-trigger. This is different to the way Street Fighter 4 handled it, where you had to remember another relatively complex button combination to then perform your ultra attack, which really only helped those players that are already moderately good at both inputting and playing the game at the same time. I believe the V-skill, V-trigger and V-reversals help casual players and competitive players in similar ways, being easy for casual players to input and understand, and helping competitive players by giving them another layer of complexity which they can use in their decision making to help outperform another player in a match. Now, I might have missed the point of this video originally, but I think over the course of this video I've described how I think Street Fighter V helps new players over the other Street Fighter games and why I think it's pretty fun. Thank you so much for watching. I do LPs, you can watch them if you like. I'm gonna try and do more of this kind of stuff because off-kilter rants, discussions are cool. See you next time.